Again, we have Dan Babcock, now the co-author of Managing Engineering and Technology, with the text. And in coming editions, well, in the next edition, I have thought about changing the order that you have the management functions in. And one thing I really like about your textbook is the fact that you do have the management functions in there. But planning, organizing, leading, and controlling, I would like to make it leading, planning, organizing, and controlling, because it just seems like without a leader you can't have a plan.
That's entirely true, and probably will improve it.
I think the way you took the 4 functions and put them in there was terrific. And there's another thing which I didn't tell you I was going to ask you about, was to put more about global in there, up towards the front, because we have become more of a flat world and a global world.
That's essential today. It wasn't as obvious in 22 years ago, and wasn't as true, but it's essential today.
Well, yes, when you said it was about 89, 90 was about the first edition, and that was the beginning of the end of the Soviet bloc, the Berlin Wall. So things really just started happening about that time.
Leadership is essential, and globalization has pervaded, and the world is one communication, simple communication.
Right. Do you still think that engineering management is still as important or more important than it was back in 1990?
It's very important, because we're in a much more technical age where technology and an understanding of technology and an ability to create with technology is essential.
All right, one last question that led to. What is the difference between engineering management and just plain management, in your view?
The engineering manager does 2 things especially well. The engineering manager is essential to manage those activities in engineering, in development, in design, in manufacturing, in most every kind of company. He's also essential for the top leadership in technology-based firms. And we have so many of them in today's world of computers and robots and whatever is next.
And you think engineers having the technical knowledge do a better job of managing those engineers or the technical world?
Yes, indeed. But they have to stay engineers. They have to maintain their engineering principles. The problem with the first explosion of in the way to space was that the producers of the solid rocket boosters, all of them engineers as I recall, president and vice president, said when their contract was continuing to produce the boosters that they had a multi-million-dollar contract in process for renewal with NASA, and NASA was nagging them, when could they take off, when could they go into space, as winter was beginning to pass. Their responsible engineer said, not now, because we've only tested the booster down to 50 degrees and it was marginal then. The solid booster with O-rings connecting the sections. And when a takeoff was scheduled, in the morning there was ice hanging on to the rings where the parts of the booster were joined. And the engineer responsible said, "You can't take off under those conditions. We don't know what will happen." And NASA said, so they told NASA that. And NASA said, "When are you going to let us take off? July?" Well, the engineering vice presidents and the president of the company that made the boosters said, "Now we've got to take off our engineering hat and put on our management hat." And they let NASA go ahead. And the rocket exploded and killed 7 astronauts. The moral of that story is you can never take off your engineering hat, even if you get into top management.
That is great. You know, I have a personal touch on that. The day before the Challenger exploded, I had been out there to talk to NASA about doing my PhD with the NASA people. So it was freezing cold out there the day before, and I was back at the university and watched the explosion from the engineering building there at the University of Central Florida. And what happened was, wait a minute, excuse me.
Hang it up there. That may require some editing.
That might, okay. And we watched it explode, and I think that for the people that watched it, there was a phenomenal, it hit everybody. And we have in the textbook the example of that in ethics. Today's students are not that familiar with Challenger. And, you know, you have to go more beyond that now to explain the whole feeling to Challenger. And by the way, I did not write my dissertation on anything to do with NASA because there was no way you could even go out there again.
Excellent.